We are bringing the know-how, the relationships and the reputation to the table. And on the other hand, you have this technical powerhouse with hundreds of developers. This is coming together, sometimes clashing, but also in a positive way. There will be a big consolidation wave. A lot of exchanges will vanish because it's not cheap to keep an exchange or a broker running under the MiCA setup in a regulatory compliant way. I have a price tag in my mind, more than 10 million, I think you definitely need to set up shop from a regulatory compliant perspective. Our aim should be to grow together the entire market and just get a bigger share in total. For sure, we want to be better than the others. Yeah, the digital asset industry will grow massively over the next years, and this will be beneficial for all players who have a long breath to really position them in the right way, gain a lot of customers from a retail perspective, but also from an institutional perspective, and localize the brand and the product.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the New Money Podcast, the show where we talk about crypto and hopefully find out how exactly the future of money looks like. Shockingly so, I do not have the Lydian lion in my background because I'm traveling right now, but we're more than excited to have a familiar face on the show, one of our old friends at Ivy, Christian Niedermüller from KuCoin, who stepped into the COO role at KuCoin Europe exactly 5 months ago. We just discussed how time flies. And we're excited to have him on for a KuCoin update, view on regulation, a view on stablecoins, and kind of like a market perspective. When we talked to the references in preparation of the call, everyone was telling us that Christian is a power networker and can intro you to anyone in crypto in under 24 hours. And I've actually enjoyed that myself quite a bit so far. And so it sounds like the guy you want to have at your dinner party. But Christian, as someone who's plugged into the European ecosystem and has an eye on the ground, what are the up-and-coming teams that people should be aware of, that you are excited about, that are building cool stuff, cool things in crypto right now?
That's a very interesting question. I think there are many, actually. I think Europe in general is a bit, has too much of an understatement sometimes when it comes to how active builders are. I mean, that next to my KuCoin job, I'm also co-founder of SMAPE Capital, of a venture capital fund in the industry. So I still have quite boots on the ground as well from a new founder perspective and new teams. And I think you can see a lot of like interesting projects developing actually on the security data perspective. You can still see a lot of like new players when it comes to payment services. I mean, as you're building a fantastic one as well. So there and close to the regulatory topics, you can see a lot of new startups and ideas being built. And I think that's exciting. I mean, right now, as we are speaking, there's the Berlin Blockchain Week, and there's also a lot going on. So I think you also know a lot of interesting projects have their roots in Europe, like Ethereum, Polkadot, and so on and so forth. Yeah, I think there's lots going on in the industry.
I appreciate it. And I think actually I'm from Berlin, right? And so I think if you think about the center of gravity of that European ecosystem, I think for quite some time it has been Berlin actually, right? If you think about Polkadot, if you think about Ethereum early contributors, maybe even. And at the same time, I do feel that has shifted quite a bit, right? I mean, even with Berlin Blockchain Week right now, it's good, but I do feel that the center of gravity has shifted more towards the south, probably Switzerland. Well, what's your perception like? If you think about the European ecosystem, where is that shifting to?
Yeah, very, very good question. I think it has spread a bit. I also think that Switzerland actually has lost a bit of the dominance or as a focus point the recent years. So there's still a lot of foundations in Switzerland, and around Zug especially. Actually, a lot of the building stuff has been removed or gone somewhere else. Yeah. And so I think the center of the ideas of the production and of like development and also of the idea generation is not entirely in Berlin and Switzerland or Zug. It's spread, I think, across. There are a lot of teams went to Portugal last years, also to Eastern Europe, Southern Europe. So I've seen big parts, for example, of the SUI team in Greece. In Cyprus, there are a lot of founders, for example, Cyber Fund, and a lot of their portfolio companies are in Cyprus. So yeah, I would agree. There's a lot going on in the south as well. I also think that Berlin, unfortunately, has lost a bit of connectivity to some extent, or it's not anymore the heavyweight it used to be at the beginning. Yeah.
Why do you feel that's the case?
Yeah, because there's like quite some projects moved away, and maybe it's because it just has lost attractiveness from a tax perspective, maybe from a company setup perspective, or there's from a company or foundation setup perspective, for sure, BVI is very relevant still, but and also Switzerland. And for all of that, Germany is not, Germany or other Central European countries are not like really interesting destinations when it comes to that. Talent is expensive, as we know, or more expensive than in other locations. And when talent is not on the ground and mingling, then also the ecosystem is not entirely always there. So I think it just became much more international. So, and much more remote. So a lot of teams are just spread out across the world. I'm not sure how it's with Ivy, and I know you have an office, but yeah, it's more spread out, I think. Yeah.
I think crypto, like native crypto teams are distinctly remote, right? I think that's like a bit of a character of the industry also. So it's a traveling industry, right? People are everywhere all the time, all the place. Ivy's pretty in office, right? Like, so we started as a remote company back during COVID when we started the business. So that was the default. And we've actually invested quite some energy and time and money to get everyone back into the office and kind of like really create a culture around that. And I do believe in that and the upside in that.
We're doing the same now with KuCoin in Vienna. So with setting up shop there, we also really try to hire almost everyone in Vienna or get them to Vienna and also get them to the office. So we also have a very nice office, some amenities, and really try to have like the core team for 3 days a week in the office. And I also think that's very beneficial for the progress of a project, of a company. Yeah.
And if you think about, so you guys opened up shop in Vienna with KuCoin Europe. We visited you guys recently there on the ground. And I think it's a beautiful city. It's a beautiful setup. We just talked about how you're moving back there as well, right? Like you're originally Austrian, if I'm not completely mistaken. But all these things put aside, if you would have had to choose a different kind of like hub for KuCoin within Europe, where would you think you guys would have gone?
Oh, good question. I know that like so all these big exchanges, they especially the Asian exchanges, they made their assessments the last 1.5 years. Yeah. What's a good jurisdiction? Where is talent? Where's the regulator? Where's a regulator with a good reputation and also hands-on and knowledgeable? And based on these factors or elements, a lot of them have chosen actually Vienna. But some also have chosen, for example, Amsterdam. I think Amsterdam is also a great city, a great place. The Netherlands are very advanced because of Bitwavo, where Austria has Bitpanda, the Netherlands have Bitwavo. I think these two jurisdictions are very interesting. Then, I mean, personally, I would probably have chosen maybe Portugal or Lisbon, the area around Lisbon. There are also a lot of crypto projects are there, and it's a very nice city environment, good place to be as well, high quality of life. So maybe it's somewhere there. Many projects went to Malta, as you know, so OKX, Crypto.com. But to be honest, I've spoken to some people like working there now for crypto exchanges, and it's a bit like they kind of like it, but it's still a small island, and it's the quality of life is okayish. It's good. You can have everything, but it's a pure expat place. It's hot. It's in the middle of the ocean. Yeah. So I think Vienna is a pretty decent choice. It's a 2 million city. It's a vibrant city. You have a lot of talent there.
If you had to change one thing about the Austrian ecosystem for crypto companies setting up shop, I mean, now you've kind of like seen it firsthand for, I think, half a year. What would that be?
If there's one thing I would change, it would be, especially for exchanges, the withholding tax topic. So Austria has a withholding tax topic for exchanges. So we need to take care that the Austrian users that we are paying, collecting the withholding tax and are sending it then to the finance authorities. And that's definitely one thing which is burdensome for centralized players, because it's a lot of work, it's a lot of responsibility, it's very complex to set up. And that's a very unique thing, which is a bit burdensome for players like Bybit, us, BitGet, Huobi. So we all need to more or less develop this just because we are in Austria. And that's burdensome. And I think if it's one thing, that would be the thing. Yeah. Just abolish this withholding tax on crypto.
Is like, how can people listening to this think about the relationship with the regulator? Like, do they listen to such a concern? Like, if you come in with kind of like practical remarks on specific rules and regulations, is there like a dialogue where you have the feeling that this is actually going into implementation?
So first of all, I mean, this topic on the tech side is something actually the finance ministry, tax authorities more or less would need to deal with, not with the regulators. But in general, and there's definite dialogue happening. There's dialogue, for example, end of next week, where things like that can be addressed. So yeah, there is listening capacity for topics like that. On the other hand, the regulator in Austria, from my perspective, is very knowledgeable because they know Bitpanda already for 10 years. They built up a really great team. They posed very knowledgeable questions when we were there for several times. So they know the industry, they know the players, they know the security, they know the security topics, know digital assets, how they work, how the infrastructure at exchanges is working. So they are knowledgeable, they have a good reputation, are hands-on, and I think they are fair. Yes, they are listening, they are actively responding, not proactively, but actively responding. So not like other regulators I've been dealing with, which are probably ghosting you for 2-3 months until you get a not really decent answer. In Austria, you get answers and you know where you are in the process. That's very good for companies who want to build something sophisticated.
What was like the most unresponsive regulator you've ever worked with?
I'm not sure if I should say this, but as you know, I built an exchange in Luxembourg, and this was kind of not the best regulator back then, the CSF, but I think a lot has changed there as well. I was on a panel a few months ago on the Luxembourg Blockchain Week with the regulator, and I think they took a very good stance now. So they changed their mind. Coinbase is coming to Luxembourg now with this, I think, Zodiac custody. So I think some of the regulators are opening up as well a lot. So I couldn't say that the bad impression I had of Luxembourg is still
Appreciate that. Hey, let's briefly talk about KuCoin and let's jump into the update. I mean, we've talked a while ago on kind of like the initial perspective of setting everything up, and now the year is almost half done. We've had a couple of guests on the show who were kind of like building crypto businesses inside larger organizations, right? And in a way, startups within startups. So we've had Uli from Bison on the show, who has been building this as like one of the leading German players from the inside of Börse Stuttgart, one of the largest European TradFi exchanges. And there's always a tension, right? Like there are always trade-offs. You get distribution, for example, of Bison versus Stuttgart, there was this clear trade-off of you get trust and you get brand and some existing distribution. And therefore you, on the other hand, you kind of like get some downside on product velocity, maybe willingness to take risks. How would you kind of like describe that trade-off for the KuCoin structure and the KuCoin relationship? What is the upside in kind of like building an exchange within a larger exchange, and what are the challenges at hand?
Yeah, no, very good question. And it's like, so in general, I worked for big banks as well, so I know how to working in big corporate organizations. But I've never really worked in a big Chinese corporation or like Chinese built corporation, and that's definitely something very special. I think something enriching for myself in terms of like experience and like what it's like to actually build a European regulated entity with very sophisticated tech builders, scale-up builders from Asia, but who have not been building a regulated entity. So we are bringing more or less the know-how and the relationships and also the reputation to the table for the regulated market for Europe. And on the other hand, you have this technical powerhouse with hundreds of developers, AI everywhere in the organization. And this is coming together, sometimes clashing, sometimes it's culture clashing. It's clashing as well from a organizational perspective, but also in a positive way. So I think for us building like the regulated entity in Europe, it's a big experience to see what you can build in such a short time and in such a sophisticated way from a tech product security perspective. And on the other hand, I think it's also a great experience for the Chinese team to see what's needed, what's required to succeed on the European market. And that's like, I think for both sides, it has been a very interesting 6 months, the last 6 months. I really enjoyed but it's definitely a big challenge. So from an operational perspective, to build this up from a legal regulatory perspective, from a team perspective, and from a stakeholder management perspective, it's a big challenge, but I really like it. It's fun.
Yeah, interesting. So much to unpack. Recently talked to a friend who deliberately partnered up with a Chinese VC firm over all the US American competitors, all the tier 1 brands in the States. And he said to me the reason why he did it was that Chinese lead in terms of genuine intensity, like genuine intensity of company building, as in not the performative hustle culture that I think he's sometimes seeing in the States, but really genuine intensity and dedication to the craft and relentlessly executing against the plan at hand. And what would you say is the Chinese professional world superpower, the organizational superpower that the people you're working with bring to the table?
I think that's definitely one element you mentioned. So you can see huge dedication from the people, like really working all around the clock from an intrinsic perspective, I think. Yeah. So people want to achieve something. They are definitely, to some extent, also like success, money focused. Yeah. But on the other hand, it's also the curiosity to build something unique, something which is really successful.
If you're now thinking about deploying the KuCoin brand in Europe, right? And you talked about how you and the team around Oliver, the broader Vienna team, are bringing the skill set, the reputation, the local expertise to the table. How do you think about product and brand, right? How do you build trust in Europe, in the regulated market, from within a kind of like originally foreign brand? How do you think about localization, and how does that influence your strategy for the year?
Yeah, I think there are a few topics there. Very good question. So in general, I think KuCoin as an Asian exchange has already a lot of clients in Europe, but is definitely probably not the number one exchange or broker in Europe. That's something which can be addressed and which will be addressed. So KuCoin now dedicated 2 billion for a so-called trust project, yeah, where everything is focused around security, trust, and so on and so forth. KuCoin invested really a lot of money and effort into the security and custody setup after being hacked as well a few years ago by Lazarus, as Bybit has been. KuCoin already invested years ago into like a really sophisticated security and custody setup. But this needs to be communicated in a better way, especially in Europe. So, and then globally, the KuCoin brand is considered as a teaching aping brand. Let's put it that way. Like tons of token, a lot of token, like listing there, it's hype and so on and so forth. And this is definitely an image, and leverage trading, like as a big topic. But this is definitely something, when you bring KuCoin to Europe, you need to localize that. Yeah, you need to see with which partners, brands, testimonials I can work with. How do I need to adjust the branding, the perception, the product landscape anyway, because of regulatory requirements on the one hand, and on the other hand, because you want to reach probably a little bit of a different audience in Europe with your product offering and with your platform offering. And that's definitely happening. So I think in every area, we need to localize the messaging, the branding, the partners. And I think then it's a great, it can be a really great European brand as well. And I think a very successful European brand then as well.
How do you go about and localize meme coins? And what does that mean in practice?
Yeah, I think that there has to be a different, kind of localization rather than just localizing meme coins or aping into the next shitcoin. It needs to have a different angle. Yeah. And I mean, we are just about to, I can't tell too much about it. We're just about designing this brand awareness brand in Europe and the strategy around it. And it definitely has a lot of elements around trust, but also with testimonials, which give it a little bit of a different flavor than the existing players in Europe, which still makes it a fun place to trade different token and maybe a larger variety of token and assets than on other places. But yeah, still has a different vibe, a more modern, more youthfully juvenile vibe than others. Yeah, I think that's very important. Then, I mean, you need brand ambassadors, local brand ambassadors, local experiences, local sponsoring for sure to some extent. And we're working on all of that. I think it's going to be really good.
Yeah. Who do you perceive as the biggest competitor, especially given that specific positioning and historical traction on the KuCoin platform? Who would you say competes in that specific part of the market?
It's all a bit mixing now. So players like Bitpanda, who are more on the broker side and more on the very customer convenience and easy trading, but also on the more expensive side of things when it comes to fees, are going as well into the derivatives trading area, where KuCoin is very strong and very present, and also adding a lot of token. Yeah. Then you have OKX, Bybit and others. Bybit probably has one of the most similar, larger setups, probably not as strong as in smaller token and in the leverage trading area, but also very strong. So I think actually the biggest competitors are other Asian exchanges coming to Europe, because Coinbase, Kraken, being at Bitpanda, they have a little bit of a different product offering, and I also perceived a little bit of a different way, other than being it OKX, who will be Bybit and ourselves. So I think those are more our direct competitors rather than the more Western exchanges. Also from, we have to be we kind of have a different setup in Europe now from an operational and product perspective other than on the global side of things. And that will also make a difference. But also the other Asian players, most of them need to have the same setup in Europe. Yeah.
What's your thesis on why you guys are going to win against OKX and Bybit?
So I think in general, the term winning, for sure we want to win a lot of customers, but the term winning, I think is I like to win. Yeah. And I think we will win in some kind of way. But for me, it's not like winning that these competitors are vanishing from the market. I think our aim should be to grow together the entire market and just get a bigger share in total. For sure, we want to be better than the others, yeah, and offer like more interesting product setups and easier product setups and a better platform. But the others are also very good. So it's not that that this is the case. I think there will be some areas where you can win more market share, and that's what we're going to do. And there will be areas, customer segments where others will win more market share, and that's the way it is. But I think we can, like the digital asset industry will grow massively over the next years, and this will be beneficial for all players who will be compliant from a regulatory perspective and have a long breath to really position them in the right way, gain a lot of customers from a retail perspective, but also from an institutional perspective, and localize the brand and the product offering. Yeah. Then it's a winning game for all, I think.
I'm bullish on that as well, and I'm quite invested in all of that as well. If you think about the specific customer segments that you've mentioned, where you think there's still upside for KuCoin, where you want to grow, is there any specific customer segment that you are particularly bullish on and going to focus on?
Yeah, I think the more intuitive you make the buying and selling of interesting and new digital assets, being it token or being it tokenized shares, tokenized commodities and stuff like that, and the more you make it an experience to be kind of the asset manager of the future, one of the few asset managers of the future of the new generations, the better it will be for us, but the better it will be as well for the customer. So I think we can win market share, not just with the youngest generations, but especially I think the biggest market share we can win is between in the age of 30 to 50, actually. I think this is actually where people become probably a little bit more like fee sensitive at some point. We will definitely be on the lower side of the fee range compared to other European competitors. And I think that's where we can win, especially in this like customer segment, and with this proposition being maybe a little bit of a better platform from a product and marketing perspective, and as well from a fee perspective.
Let's briefly talk about MiCA. You've worked on MiCA since block trade days, right? The crypto exchange you co-founded and worked on in Luxembourg. If you reflect on like the past half year and like the ongoing conversations that you've talked about, kind of like explaining to KuCoin Global what it means to run a regulated business in Europe with MiCA on the horizon, what are like the parts and pieces of the regulation that are hardest to explain and that kind of like the non-European folks struggle most with implementing or understanding or appreciating?
I think it's a lot of the soft factors that the regulators are kind of demanding, which is not entirely written like that into the legislation. It's like these topics, being it like tax, financial reporting, like DSC8, CAF, being it topics like DORA, GDPR already arrived as well in other jurisdictions. But all these elements, like being it the necessity to have a chief information security officer or a crypto safeguarding officer or a local tech lead CTO who manages everything from an incident management perspective. So all these requirements from a reporting, setup, process perspective and process ownership perspective, and what it needs as well from a personal perspective to execute on that, I think that's the hardest to explain. That's what I meant before when I said, okay, one of the hardest points is actually the whole stakeholder management around that, because we don't want to build a kingdom of our own, more or less, with KuCoin Europe. We really just want to build a regulated shop, which is compliant from a regulatory perspective. And on the other hand, you also have the already for KuCoin, for example, a company with more than 1,000 people in Asia, more or less almost all the topics we have to build locally from a setup organizational perspective are already there. That's the interesting part, where who is coming directly to Europe, who will be employed with us, which services are we outsourcing, are we allowed to outsource, to which extent. This is the hardest part, because a lot of that is also not like 100% written. Okay, do it like from A to Z like that. It's the fine things you then get told by the lawyers working together with the regulatory bodies and so on and so forth. So this is definitely the hardest. These are the hardest things to explain. The whole setup and the requirements.
What's the price tag for an exchange to set up a good regulated shop in Europe and operationalize that?
Good question. It's not cheap. So that's why it's also a bit hard, I think, for smaller exchanges to survive next few years. So there will be a big consolidation wave, I think, and a lot of exchanges will vanish from the market, smaller ones, because it's not cheap to keep an exchange or a broker running under the MiCA setup in a regulatory compliant way. You need, as I mentioned, a lot of additional resources, a lot of compliance tools. Many exchanges who are there already have these tools in place, being it transaction monitoring, market surveillance, and so we have an own compliance matrix with all the providers and tools and things we need to have in place on the platform. That all costs a lot of money. I have a price tag in my mind, which is definitely in the millions. More than 10 million, I think you definitely need, to set up shop in from a regulatory compliant perspective. Yeah.
Is that mostly driven by personnel and substance requirements, like the people you have to have on the ground?
Yes, definitely. And depends on how much you already have in place, but if you set up shop completely new from scratch, and I'm not saying this is per year, I'm saying to build this up more or less, yeah. And then it depends how much you are referring to topics like marketing and initialization strategy. But in the end, you need probably a team of between 25 and 60, 70 people, depending on your overall size. And that's and you need good people to do it with such a small team. And so that's definitely something where you need a lot of people, you need a lot of tools. Software as a service is a topic. Yeah. Then you also need capital. So there are capital requirements. So it's definitely not very easy and cheap to run a MiCA, set up a MiCA entity and run it. It's not something everyone can do, I think. Yeah.
No, I appreciate that. Hey man, looking at the time, we're already coming to an end. 3 quickfire questions to kind of wrap it up, kind of walk through them and try to answer them with a single sentence, if possible. Does that make sense?
Yeah, sure.
Awesome. 1 crypto regulation you would immediately rewrite. What is it?
Probably around the stable coins. I would make them more a little bit less regulated. I think in Europe, we were overshooting especially on the stable coin topic.
To that point, would you buy Circle stock at 30 billion?
I would have bought it at the IPO price. Okay, that's easy to say because it's 10 times. But I think long term, Arthur Hayes was saying it's overvalued and it will be very hard for additional players to make a market entry, where I agree with him. But I still think Circle is definitely, after Tether, the most important stablecoin. So I think it's probably close to a fair market value. So I thought it was very undervalued at the start of the IPO, but now it's probably a little bit too high or market value. I mean, but they will definitely gain a lot of additional market share. The stablecoin market will grow like crazy from my perspective, and they will have a fair share of it, definitely. Yeah.
I appreciate that. If you had to be COO of a different fintech, which would it be?
Interesting question. Maybe a PSP open banking provider like IB. I don't know. No, good question. Like I wouldn't define myself. So I never had these career goals of working for one or the other company. It was always a flow. Like I met interesting people, saw interesting ideas, like especially amazing teams. So what really attracts me are amazing teams, like how if you can see that a team is working in an amazingly efficient and like awesome way together, I think that would be the main motivation to join them. And, if they are working intensively in an amazing way together, most likely the product and the company are also amazing, because otherwise they wouldn't have this intrinsic motivation to keep on grinding like that. And that's normally the best sign that you would like to work as a CEO, for example, for such a company. So I wouldn't say for company X or Y. I would more say like it's about the team identifying with the vision and the company and having the intrinsic motivation to work around the clock and not even noticing because you're having so much fun. That's the kind of company I would like to be a CEO if I wouldn't have the role with KuCoin Europe right now.
Christian, thank you so much for tuning in and giving us the KuCoin update 6 months in. I'm very excited to hear the update 6 months from now. I'm sure things will look way different then as well. Thank you so much for coming by. To everyone who listened, we do this every year. We do this every week. So feel free to subscribe on all relevant platforms and see you soon.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Ferdinand. Yeah, talk to you soon. Ciao.